Left, it was worse. It was 32nd. But I said, it's bad with him. He can't defend the run. And Jerry Jones, an oil man, doesn't want all his oil in one or two wells. He wants to have 7 or 8 wells. They want to diversify their portfolio. So Stephen Jones is now admitting 1 year later with Kenny Clark and Rashawn Gary and their draft picks where they went Caleb Downs and another edge rusher and Quinnen Williams. Stephen Jones is like, yeah, it worked out just the way we told you it would.
We feel really good about it. Obviously, much respect for Micah and what he stands for and how he plays and the caliber of player he is. But, at the same time, we feel good about what we've added, via that trade. The decision we made was, that one player is not worth, 4 or 5 good ones. And we feel like that's where we're going to end up here and in a good spot. And, we had that opportunity there and didn't feel like we were one player away last year, but I certainly feel like we're putting the pieces together.
When you make a big trade, nobody's denying that the star that comes to town, it can be Matt Stafford, it can be Micah Parsons, they add value to the team they land, no question. But if you really go and look at a lot of the big trades, the team that loses the star frees up capital and draft picks. Stafford leaves the Lions. That was actually the beginning. A year later, and about a year and a half later, it was the beginning of something special. All those draft picks and a free Jared Goff. That's how Brad Holmes built what he has right now. If you go look at Tyreek Hill, all those draft picks Kansas City got, they used them to shore up their defense. That dynasty started as an offensive dynasty. The last several Super Bowls have been a defensive dynasty. Mahomes and defense, they all came from the Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill added some value to the Dolphins. Nobody's saying he didn't. I mean, if you go look at Russell Wilson, when he got moved off Seattle, 2 of the draft picks they got from Russell Wilson, Charles Cross, excellent left tackle, and Witherspoon. Von Witherspoon from Illinois, unbelievable, second or third, maybe first best corner in the league.
Can you all do me a favor here? Honestly, I really, truly need your assistance. I'm going to be straight with you. Why on earth do we keep having the same endless conversation about Micah Parsons and a potential trade involving the Dallas Cowboys? I genuinely, honestly do not get it. I'd like to think, I don't want to call it arrogance, but more like, I feel I'm fairly skilled at steering these kinds of discussions, at figuring things out, at predicting where the media will head next, which topics are actually worth diving into, why certain subjects come up in the first place, how to break them down, separate reality from noise, identify what's truly worth examining within a given narrative, and even shift the conversation entirely if I believe we're focusing on the wrong angle. But try as I might, I absolutely, utterly, completely fail to understand why every single time the Dallas Cowboys come up, it's always through this Micah Parsons filter. We did this dance all through the previous season. And back then, I understood it, it was a huge potential trade, I get that. But we just keep going, keep persisting with this notion as if Micah Parsons were somehow equivalent to the Cowboys having just traded away a prime Tom Brady or a 28-year-old Patrick Mahomes or something. Look, I'm not clueless. Micah Parsons is obviously a fantastic player, a tremendous talent, right? No question about it, he's awesome, awesome, awesome. And yes, he plays for the Dallas Cowboys, and yes, he's a popular name. But still, I don't know. It's just that, it's not that I don't understand simple concepts. I really, really don't get this fixation. And what I continue to find baffling is when a guy like Colin, he'll clearly state that this whole situation was exactly what the Cowboys wanted to accomplish, that it was the start of something special, blah blah blah, but then immediately turns around and predicts the Cowboys will only win 7 or 8 games. So, what? If you tell me that trading away Micah means missing the playoffs for the next 2 years and winning only 7 or 8 games each season, then that's just bad business. That's poor management. That's not the start of something promising. And again, if your quarterback were 23 years old, you could say, well, we'll go through some growing pains with him. That would be a perfect scenario because by the time he hits his prime, you'd be rolling. But no, by then, Dak will be in his mid-30s, and you'll have to start flirting with the idea of finding another quarterback. So I don't see the logic. I don't understand this obsession with Micah. I truly don't. It would be one thing if the Cowboys had won multiple championships and Micah were a two-time MVP or something, right? We didn't even do this with Tyreek Hill and the Kansas City Chiefs. We didn't. We absolutely, positively did not. In fact, the only person I still hear bringing that up is Colin himself, who constantly uses Tyreek Hill as a reference point. And the argument is, look what the Chiefs were able to do, they traded him and still won Super Bowls. But let's look closer, they eked out those wins, one against a quarterback you don't consider good, Jalen Hurts, on a last-second field goal, another against Brock Purdy, whom people definitely don't think is elite, that needed overtime, then they got blown out by that same not-good quarterback Jalen Hurts, then missed the playoffs, and now they're desperate to find another receiver, another weapon, and so on. And that's with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, the whole operation. So again, why this endless obsession with viewing the Cowboys solely through the lens of Micah Parsons? I just don't get it. And even when the Cowboys front office, Stephen Jones or whoever, gets interviewed and asked about this, you could simply say, hey buddy, that conversation was a year ago. I'm focused on the players we have right now. End of story. Here's another thing I continue to take issue with, this narrative that trading Micah was the plan all along. It wasn't. The Cowboys were ready to pay Micah a huge amount of money. They wanted to pay him a huge amount. Maybe not quite as much as he ultimately demanded, but they were still prepared to give him a massive deal. They wanted to keep him. That is so obvious, so clearly documented. We don't need any revisionist history whatsoever. So let's stop it. Let's absolutely put an end to that nonsense. It's the same kind of LSE narrative they tried to spin with the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, so smart, they moved on from Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. No, they didn't. They wanted to keep Geno. They wanted to keep DK. We don't have to rewrite history. The same thing was happening with the Philadelphia Eagles recently. I forgot to mention this in another segment, but when people say, oh, the Eagles are so savvy, they move on from quarterbacks, look at Carson Wentz. They wanted to keep Carson Wentz. They did everything to keep him, that's why they fired Doug Peterson, to try to make Wentz happy. Only when they realized that relationship was completely broken did they say, okay, we'll send you to the Colts. And then along came Jalen Hurts. That was not the master plan. That was never the ultimate design at all. We can pretend it was, we can engage in revisionist history, but that doesn't make it true. They knew Carson kept getting injured, so they needed a backup plan, that's why they drafted Hurts in the second round. But the original plan was never draft Hurts and move on from Wentz. That was just plan B that eventually became plan A. We don't need to rewrite history to make a move look better. We don't have to do that. So again, I just don't understand why we keep viewing the Cowboys through this Micah Parsons lens. I don't get it. I really don't. And by the way, Jared Goff wasn't traded for free, was he? Didn't he have a $150 million contract, which at the time was enormous? Hadn't he get dealt $12 million his rookie deal? He had already been paid. And then after one or 2 years with Lions, whatever it was, maybe after 2023, he got another $150 million contract, which at the time was enormous? Hadn't he get dealt $12 million his rookie deal? He had already been paid. And then after 1 or 2 years with Lions, whatever it was, maybe after 2023, he got another $200 million. He got top dollar again. And he also had Ben Johnson as his offensive coordinator. Matthew Stafford never had Ben Johnson. And plenty of people argue that Jared Goff is actually holding the Detroit Lions back. I'm not necessarily one of them, I'm not, but still, I went back and watched that NFC Championship game. He played really poorly. He was not good. Not the NFC Championship game actually, he played great in that one. I mean the divisional round against the Washington Commanders in 2024. Snort, so. I don't know. And again, I'm not saying that moving on from Micah was the wrong decision. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I was advocating for back in 2024. I went back and forth at the time because the big conversation was about CeeDee Lamb, Micah, and Dak. And I'm almost positive my take was, move on from Micah. I'm almost certain that was my position because I said, you know what, at this point, I think it's better to get Micah out of the building. I'm about 99% sure because we were floating scenarios. What do you do with CD? What do you do with Dak? There were rumors that maybe they'd move on from Dak. I remember Nick said he wouldn't sign Dak, and then Dak immediately got his contract, and everyone was like, okay, never mind. I'm almost positive that's how it unfolded. Then there was talk. I recall making a video about the possibility of Dak being traded to the Raiders, and the Raiders fans wanted nothing to do with that. They said, we don't want Dak, we want Aiden O'Connell. I remember that very clearly. So the question became, do you move on from Dak, acquire great draft capital, and reset with a rookie quarterback contract? I remember floating those ideas, not saying that's what the Cowboys should do, but just exploring the theoretical options. And people would say, Dak has a no-trade clause. And my response was, that doesn't really matter because you go to him and say, we want to trade you, and we're drafting another quarterback. Either you agree to go to a decent team, or you sit on the bench, which hurts you more than us. Everyone's always so confident about that no-trade clause, but often it's in the quarterback's best interest to cooperate, it just gives him veto power to avoid somewhere like Cleveland. Otherwise, it's simple, you're not going to play here. You're in our past. Do you want to sit or do you want to play? So I remember having that entire discussion, and I ultimately concluded, you know what, it's time to move on from Micah. So I was actually a year early on the trade Micah call. So this isn't about being unwilling to give the Cowboys credit for the Micah trade or anything like that. It's simply that I cannot make logical sense of this ongoing obsession. That's why I need you all to help me out here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment, whether you agree with me or disagree. Either way, let's get some discussions going. Let's get into some arguments, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. Please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you be part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something we're truly excited to belong to. I think we're well on our way to doing that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it really helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.